The last known photograph of Rachel Monroe was never meant to be seen by her family. In it, she is standing in the dark woods, eyes wide with fear, while something or someone lingers in the shadows just behind her. That haunting image was trapped inside a water-damaged camera, hidden beneath leaves and dirt for more than a decade. And when investigators finally developed the film in 2005, the disturbing photos inside didn't just reopen a cold case. They revealed a nightmarish glimpse into what may have happened to Rachel and her fiancé, Michael Turner. But to understand the horror captured in those final photographs, we need to go back to the beginning, to the summer of 1994, when two young people, deeply in love and excited to start their lives together, stepped onto a hiking trail in the Colorado wilderness and vanished. Rachel Monroe and Michael Turner were inseparable. She was 24, a schoolteacher with a soft laugh and a love for poetry. He was 26, an aspiring architect with a sketchbook always tucked under his arm. The two met at a college football game, bumped into each other in a crowded hallway, and by the end of the night, they were already talking about their dreams. By the summer of 1994, they were engaged, planning a fall wedding. Their families still remember the little details. Rachel carefully folding wedding invitations at the kitchen table, Michael proudly showing his mother the ring he had chosen, saying, "She deserves something timeless." They had everything to look forward to: a wedding, a home, a lifetime together. But before the chaos of wedding planning consumed them, they wanted one last quiet adventure. Both loved the outdoors, and they decided to spend a weekend hiking the rugged San Juan Mountains in Colorado. It was supposed to be a short trip, a Saturday morning hike, a few photos along the trail, and then back home by Sunday. But they would never return. On July 9, 1994, Rachel and Michael parked Michael's blue Toyota near the trailhead of Miller's Peak. The area was popular among hikers, serene, with winding trails, tall pines, and streams that shimmered under the sun. Witnesses recall seeing the couple that morning, Michael adjusting his backpack straps, Rachel tying her hiking boots. They looked happy, excited, completely unaware that they were walking into the unknown. By Monday morning, when Rachel failed to show up for work and Michael missed an appointment with a client, alarm bells rang. At first, friends thought maybe they had extended the trip. But by Tuesday, their parents contacted police. Search teams scoured the trails. Helicopters buzzed overhead. Volunteers with dogs combed the forest. The couple's car was still at the trailhead, keys gone but doors locked. Inside were Rachel's spare shoes, a water bottle, and Michael's sketchbook, but no clue of where they had gone. For days, searchers battled rugged terrain, sudden rainstorms, and dense forest. But there was nothing. No torn clothing, no campsite, no tracks. The couple had simply vanished. The Monroes and the Turners refused to give up. Rachel's father stood outside the ranger station handing out flyers with their faces on them. Michael's mother appeared on local TV, pleading, "If anyone knows anything, please, bring them back to us." But weeks turned into months. Rumors began to swirl. Some suggested they had run away together, abandoning their lives to start fresh. Others whispered about animal attacks or dangerous strangers lurking on the trails. The families rejected these theories. They knew Rachel and Michael, responsible, deeply in love, with every reason to come home. As the years passed, the case grew cold. Every now and then, a hiker would report finding something: a scrap of fabric, a weathered shoe. But none of it was linked to the missing couple. Their faces faded from the news. But for their families, the pain never left. By 2005, it had been 11 years. Rachel's younger brother was now an adult. Michael's father had passed away, never knowing what became of his son. The families gathered every July to light candles and share memories. But even that ritual was tinged with despair. It seemed like the mountains had swallowed the young couple whole. And then, a discovery changed everything. In August of 2005, a group of hikers stumbled upon something unusual near a dry creek bed several miles off the main trail. At first glance, it looked like a weathered piece of trash. An old black camera, half buried in mud and leaves. Curious, one of the hikers picked it up. Despite the water damage, the roll of film inside was still intact. The hikers turned it over to the local sheriff's office, not thinking much of it. But when the film was developed, the photographs told a story that no one could explain. The first few images were innocent. Rachel smiling at the trailhead, Michael posing with his backpack, the couple holding hands with the forest stretching out behind them. But as the roll progressed, the photos grew unsettling. There was Rachel standing in the woods at dusk, her expression tight, uneasy. Michael half-turned as if he had heard something behind him. And then, a photograph of the trees, blurry, tilted, as if the camera had been dropped. Another image showed Rachel again, but this time her eyes were wide, her body tense. And in the corner of the frame, almost hidden by the shadows, was the outline of a figure. Tall, motionless, watching. The final photograph was the most chilling of all. Rachel alone, standing at the edge of what appeared to be a well. Her face pale, lips parted as though she was about to scream. Behind her, in the darkness of the trees, that same shadowy figure loomed closer. And then, nothing. The roll ended. The photographs sent shockwaves through the community. Investigators reopened the case, analyzing the images frame by frame. Was the figure a person? A trick of the light? Could it be the key to understanding what happened to Michael and Rachel? For the families, the photos were both a gift and a curse. Finally, proof that the couple had made it deep into the trail. Proof that something had terrified them. But no answers. No closure. Only more questions. Theories spread like wildfire. Some believed the couple had stumbled upon something or someone they were never meant to see. Others insisted the figure was an illusion, a cruel trick of shadows and failing light. But for Rachel's mother, one photograph haunted her most. Her daughter standing at the well, eyes filled with terror. She often whispered, "What did she see that night? What was waiting for them in those woods?" The discovery of the camera changed everything, but it did not bring Rachel and Michael home. To this day, their bodies have never been found. The only trace of their final hours lies in a strip of photographs too disturbing to forget. And some investigators believe that not all the photos from that camera have ever been released to the public. If that's true, then what else was captured that night in 1994? And why has it been kept hidden? In the weeks following the discovery of the camera, the sheriff's department held a press conference. Grainy versions of a few photographs were released to the media. They confirmed the couple made it deep into the trail. They confirmed something had terrified them. But when reporters pressed for more details, investigators grew strangely evasive. Rachel's brother, Daniel, remembers sitting in the audience that day. He leaned toward his mother and whispered, "They're not telling us everything." And he was right. Behind the scenes, detectives debated what to do with the remaining photos. Some were too unclear to be useful. Others, according to one leaked memo, were too disturbing for public release. For the Monroes and the Turners, it was a cruel blow. After 11 years of silence, they finally had something tangible, but it came with even more questions. Rachel's mother begged investigators to let her see all the images. They refused. Michael's father had already passed away without answers, and now the families felt history was repeating itself. Truth withheld, closure denied. Local newspapers picked up on the controversy. Why were the photos hidden? What could possibly be more disturbing than the ones already shown? The sheriff's office offered no explanation. Soon, rumors began to spread. Some said the unseen photos showed Rachel and Michael running, blurred with motion, as though someone had been chasing them. Others claimed one picture captured Michael pointing at something in the trees, his face twisted in horror. The most unsettling rumor of all? That the final frames revealed not just one shadowy figure, but several. If true, that would mean Rachel and Michael weren't just being watched. They were being surrounded. In 2007, 2 years after the discovery, an investigative journalist named Claire Donovan began digging into the case. She had covered missing person stories before, but something about Rachel and Michael's disappearance stuck with her. Through a source inside the sheriff's office, Claire obtained what she described as fragments of additional photographs. She never revealed exactly how. But in a late-night radio interview, she described one in chilling detail. It was Rachel, sitting on the ground, clutching Michael's arm. They both looked terrified. But in the background, behind them, there were shapes. Not clear, but definitely human. Watching. Closing in. Listeners were horrified. And suddenly, the case was back in the headlines. Shortly after that interview, Claire Donovan reported that her house had been broken into. Nothing of value was taken, except her laptop and a small fireproof box where she stored copies of her research. The missing photos she claimed to have? Gone. Police treated it as a burglary, but Claire was convinced it was something else. She told colleagues she was being followed, that someone didn't want the truth about Rachel and Michael coming out. Within a year, she stopped talking about the case altogether. Some say she was threatened. Others believe she was discredited on purpose. But the rumors about the missing photos only grew stronger. Meanwhile, Rachel's brother Daniel tried to keep the search alive. He started a website dedicated to his sister and Michael, posting the known photos, timelines, and theories. Thousands of people followed, sharing tips and speculation. Michael's younger sister, Emily, refused to look at the photographs at all. "I don't want my last memory of him to be fear," she said in an interview. For the families, every rumor, every headline was a wound reopened. They wanted the truth, but part of them feared it too. Because if the missing photos were real, they might reveal a fate too terrible to bear. Today, the official record still shows only the photographs the sheriff's office chose to release. The rest remain unseen. But some insist they've surfaced on the dark web, traded like secrets between people obsessed with unsolved mysteries. And if that's true, then someone, somewhere, is still holding the missing evidence from that camera. The evidence that could finally reveal what Rachel and Michael saw in those woods, and what really happened on that trail in 1994. In 2016, a strange post appeared on an obscure internet forum. It claimed to show unreleased evidence from the Monroe Turner case. At first, no one paid much attention, until one user uploaded grainy, low-resolution images that matched the sheriff's department photographs. But there were others. One picture showed Michael, crouched low, holding Rachel's hand. His face was pale, and in the background, two blurry figures stood among the trees. Another showed a crude stone circle, half buried in the ground, surrounded by strange markings carved into the dirt. And then there was one more, the image that spread like wildfire. Rachel, sitting against a tree, her face streaked with tears. Behind her, a hand, pale, skeletal-looking, reaching out from the shadows. The photos were downloaded, shared, and discussed across online forums and true crime communities. Some said they were doctored. Others swore they were authentic. When journalists asked the sheriff's department, officials flatly denied the images came from the recovered camera. They called them fakes, internet hoaxes. But families of Rachel and Michael weren't so sure. Rachel's brother, Daniel, admitted in a radio interview, "There were photos the police never showed us. They admitted that much. So when I see these, I can't just dismiss them. They look real. And that terrifies me." Around this time, independent researchers began digging deeper. They noticed something strange. Similar stories of hikers disappearing in the same region of Colorado, going back decades. And in more than one case, survivors described hearing voices in the forest or stumbling upon old stone formations that didn't look natural. One retired ranger, speaking anonymously, claimed the area near Miller's Peak was avoided by locals for generations. "There are places in those woods," he said, "that you don't go after dark. Everyone knows that." Could Rachel and Michael have wandered into something ancient, something hidden? Or were they the victims of people, not legends, who used the forest for their own dark purposes? In 2018, a private investigator obtained what he claimed were the last 3 photographs from the roll of film. He never revealed how he got them, but he described them to a documentary crew. The second-to-last photo, he said, showed Michael's backpack lying in the dirt. No sign of him, just the bag ripped open. The last photo? He hesitated before answering. It showed the well again, but this time it wasn't empty. Something or someone was inside. He refused to say more. And weeks later, the investigator stopped responding to calls and emails. He disappeared from the public eye entirely. If the leaked photos are authentic, they may hold the key to what really happened to Rachel and Michael. But if they're not, then who created them? And why? And perhaps the most chilling question of all, what was captured in that final unreleased photograph? The one said to show the well? Because if that image is real, it doesn't just point to what happened in 1994. It suggests that someone or something may still be out there. In 2019, a volunteer search and recovery team decided to retrace the couple's last known steps. Equipped with GPS, drones, and ground-penetrating radar, they mapped the area around the trailhead. At first, the forest seemed ordinary. Quiet, serene, no different than any other Colorado wilderness. But when they reached the area near the dried-up creek bed where the camera had been found years earlier, things changed. There was no official record of a well in that part of the forest. No mention on maps, no ranger logs. And yet, after hours of searching, the team stumbled upon a circular depression in the ground, half covered with moss and vines. Stones, stacked by human hands, jutted from the earth. It wasn't the exact well from the photograph, at least not anymore. But it was real, and it looked ancient. As the team cleared the brush, they found more. Symbols, faint but deliberate, carved into stones around the well. A rusted chain, buried in the dirt, and scattered bones, animal most likely, but fractured in unnatural ways. One of the volunteers later admitted in a podcast interview, "I thought we were going to find old tools, maybe camping trash. Not this. The place felt wrong. Like we weren't supposed to be there." The footage from their drones showed something else. Just beyond the clearing, narrow footpaths wound through the trees, paths not listed on any official hiking maps. Where did they lead? And who had made them? Days after the volunteers posted their findings online, the Forest Service abruptly closed off the area. Signs went up. Access was restricted due to erosion concerns. Locals whispered it was something else. Rachel's brother Daniel was furious. He had begged officials for years to expand the search. Now that people had found something, they were shutting it down. "They know more than they're saying," he told reporters. "They've always known more." By late 2019, the case wasn't just about two missing hikers anymore. It had become the center of a larger debate. Was there a cover-up? Independent researchers noted that other disappearances had been quietly documented in the same region. Hikers who went missing without a trace, campers who never returned. And in several cases, the investigations were cut short, citing lack of evidence. What was happening in those woods? Then, in 2020, a shocking claim emerged. A retired forest ranger, speaking anonymously, contacted a podcast dedicated to Rachel and Michael's case. He claimed he had been on duty the summer they vanished. And according to him, search dogs had once led rescuers directly to the well site. But when they reported it, the search was redirected. Higher-ups told them to focus elsewhere. He admitted he'd lived with guilt ever since. "That's where they were," he said. "I'm sure of it. But someone didn't want us digging there." If his story is true, then the discovery of the well wasn't new at all. Authorities may have known about it in 1994 and deliberately kept it quiet. But why? And more disturbingly, what exactly was inside that well? The same one Rachel was last photographed standing beside? Because if the rumors are true, the most disturbing evidence of all is still buried at the bottom. By 2021, pressure from online sleuths, journalists, and Rachel's family forced investigators back to Miller's Peak. The official explanation for closing the area, erosion concerns, was no longer holding up. Too many people had seen the drone footage. Too many questions had been raised about missing hikers in the same region. At last, permission was granted for a controlled excavation of the well. Cameras were barred. The site was secured. Only a small team of specialists was allowed access. But even before digging began, workers reported strange phenomena. Tools going missing overnight. The sound of water echoing. Even though the well was believed to be dry. A low, metallic banging noise deep underground. And yet, the excavation continued. Clearing debris revealed something strange. The well was not just a hole in the ground, but carefully constructed. Stones interlocked with precision, and carved into them were more symbols. Circles, cross-like figures, shapes that resembled eyes. At about 15 feet down, they discovered scraps of fabric. Faded, brittle. One piece appeared white, another pale blue. Rachel had worn a white shirt that day. Michael's jacket was blue. The excavation crew was shaken. But this was only the beginning. When the team reached 30 feet, their equipment struck something hard. Not stone, metal. A container of some kind wedged into the wall of the well. The surface was rusted, but it clearly wasn't natural. When they finally pried it loose, what they found inside sent shockwaves through the entire investigation. It was a box of photographs, hundreds of them. Some were water-damaged, but many were intact. The images were similar to the ones on Rachel's recovered camera. Candid shots of hikers, campers, couples, all unaware they were being watched. But then the images grew darker. Victims tied up, crying. In some photos, you could see the same clearing, the same stone well in the background. And in at least one photo, Rachel and Michael appeared again. This time, not smiling, not posing, but terrified. The photos were never released publicly, but insiders leaked their descriptions to journalists. The evidence was clear. The couple hadn't simply gotten lost. They had been stalked, captured, possibly tortured, and someone had been keeping a record of it all, hidden in the well. But the most chilling revelation? The box of photos contained dates. Not just from 1994, from years before, and years after, including disappearances that were never officially linked to the trail. Investigators quickly shut down the dig after the discovery. All findings were placed under restricted investigation. But whistleblowers claimed something even more disturbing was uncovered in the final days of excavation. At the very bottom of the well, past 40 feet, workers allegedly hit another structure. A sealed chamber of some kind. One that extended outward deeper into the earth. The excavation was halted before it could be opened. And official records of this chamber? They don't exist. So what was inside that chamber? If the box of photographs was real, if the well had been used to document or even store evidence of multiple disappearances, then the chamber beneath it might hold something far worse. And some now believe Rachel and Michael's fate isn't just a tragedy, but part of a pattern that may stretch across decades. The question is, who built the chamber? Who used it? And why, after so many years, are investigators still refusing to tell the full truth about what lies beneath the well? Because until that chamber is opened, the most terrifying secrets of all remain buried. For nearly 2 years, the excavation site was off-limits. The official explanation: unstable ground conditions. But families of missing hikers weren't satisfied. Rachel's brother Daniel led the fight, demanding transparency. If there's a chamber down there, then that's where the truth is. That's where my sister is. Under pressure, a joint investigative team, half law enforcement, half private contractors, was finally authorized to return in 2022. This time, cameras were allowed. But only a handful of people would ever see the footage. When they reached the chamber's entrance, workers found a stone slab, heavy and hand-carved, blocking the way. It took hydraulic equipment to move it. Behind the slab, a narrow passage descended at an angle deeper underground. The air was stale, foul, as if it hadn't been disturbed in decades. The walls of the passage weren't natural rock. They had been reinforced. Someone had built this deliberately, and every few feet more of those symbols appeared. Circles, eyes, jagged crosses. The deeper they went, the stronger the smell became. Damp earth mixed with something metallic. At the end of the passage, the team entered a small stone room. The floor was uneven, but the walls were smooth, almost polished. In the center sat a wooden chair, straps still attached. And on the ground nearby, a small pile of personal items. Broken glasses, a set of car keys, a torn shoe. The items matched descriptions from at least 3 other missing persons cases. But that wasn't the most disturbing discovery. The walls of the chamber were covered in markings. Not carved, but scratched. Frantic, desperate lines gouged into the stone. Some were unreadable. Others formed words. "Help! Don't leave me! He's watching!" And one inscription stood out, deeper and clearer than the rest. "We are not alone." Official reports end there. The chamber was sealed again. But whistleblowers claim the footage didn't stop. According to leaked descriptions, deeper inside the chamber lay a second passage. One the team was ordered not to enter. The camera operator disobeyed. For a few seconds, the footage showed what lay beyond. Rows of objects stacked neatly against the wall. Not debris, not rocks, skulls. Dozens of them. And in the far corner, a shape that looked human. Slumped, still dressed in faded fabric. One investigator swore the clothing matched Rachel's last known outfit. The feed cut abruptly. Officials announced the chamber was too unsafe for further excavation. The footage was classified. The workers were silenced. And once again, the truth about Rachel and Michael's disappearance, and the others who went missing in those woods, was buried. But if the leaks are true, then Rachel Monroe's remains may have finally been located, not lost to nature, but placed deliberately in that chamber. Which raises a darker question. Who built it? And if so many skulls were found, how many others have vanished into those mountains, never to be seen again? Because if the chamber is part of something larger, a network, a ritual, or a hunter's lair, then Rachel and Michael's story is just one piece of a far more terrifying puzzle. And some believe that puzzle isn't finished yet. After the chamber was exposed, amateur sleuths began re-examining decades of missing persons reports in the surrounding mountain ranges. The data revealed something strange. Clusters. Not random disappearances, but concentrated vanishings around very specific points, almost forming a map. And at the center of each cluster, always the same feature. An old well, a collapsed mine shaft, or a stone depression that didn't appear on any official maps. What if Rachel and Michael's case wasn't an isolated tragedy? What if it was just one piece of a network? In 2023, another anonymous insider came forward. This time, a geologist who had been contracted to survey Miller's Peak after the chamber's discovery. He revealed that ground-penetrating radar had detected multiple hollow structures beneath the region, not just one chamber, but several. Some appeared connected by narrow tunnels. When he raised the alarm, his contract was terminated. His final words before disappearing from public view were chilling. Miller's Peak is just the doorway. There are more, many more. And then, as if to confirm the nightmare wasn't over, 2 more hikers vanished in the summer of 2023. Their car was found parked at the same trailhead Rachel and Michael had used in 1994. Their gear was left inside the vehicle. They had entered the woods with nothing but light backpacks, and were never seen again. Locals began whispering that the mountain takes people. But online sleuths pointed to something darker. That the chamber had been reopened, and the cycle had begun again. Weeks later, an image surfaced on a fringe forum. It showed a blurred figure, standing in the trees near the Miller's Peak trail. Behind them, faintly visible, was the outline of the well. No one knows who took the photo. Some claim it was staged. Others insist it's real, and that it shows the same figure who appeared in the leaked photos of Rachel and Michael decades earlier. If true, that would mean whoever was hunting in those woods in 1994 may still be out there. Rachel's brother Daniel released a statement after the new disappearances. "This isn't just about my sister anymore. This is about all of them. Whoever built those chambers, whoever is keeping this hidden, they're still out there, and they won't stop unless someone stops them." But if the rumors are true, then the chamber beneath the well isn't unique. It's part of something much larger. A hidden network, stretching across the mountains, built for reasons no one fully understands. And until those chambers are opened, until the truth is exposed, hikers will keep vanishing. Because what took Rachel and Michael Turner in 1994 may still be waiting in the woods today. Researchers digging through old county records uncovered something unusual. Before Miller's Peak became a hiking destination, It had been the site of a small settlement in the 1800s. A group of homesteaders moved into the area, drawn by fertile land and abundant game. Within 5 years, the settlement was abandoned. The only records left behind were a handful of diary entries, preserved in a regional archive. One entry read, "The wells are not ours. We found them here. The men fear them, for at night we hear cries below." Another simply said, "Children gone. We must leave. The mountain is not safe." Decades later, in the 1950s, the U.S. Geological Survey conducted a quiet study of the area. Declassified documents revealed references to subterranean anomalies, voids beneath the mountain, too symmetrical to be natural. The report recommended sealing access points for public safety. But no such closures were ever made. Instead, trails were cut through the region in the 1970s, bringing more hikers to the area than ever before. Why would they build trails near a place they'd already flagged as dangerous? Then came the most disturbing lead of all. In the 1980s, locals reported strange gatherings in the forest, hooded figures seen near fire pits, chanting late into the night. Authorities dismissed them as college students playing games. But photographs from that era suggest otherwise. Several images, taken by hunters, showed stone wells decorated with candles, offerings, and strange symbols matching those carved into the chamber walls. Were the wells simply remnants of a forgotten past? Or had they been repurposed by someone else? Rachel and Michael's disappearance may not have been random. A former ranger, who worked the park in the early 90s, told journalists he had once found a campsite deep in the woods. Inside were journals filled with names, dates, and hand-drawn maps of the trails. He turned them in. Weeks later, he was reassigned. The journals were never seen again. The last entry in one of them he remembered clearly. "Two chosen. Wedding clothes. The well is ready." The date? June 1994, the same week Rachel and Michael vanished. If true, this means Rachel and Michael weren't just unlucky hikers. They were chosen, targeted, part of something orchestrated. And if the chamber beneath Miller's Peak contained remains spanning decades, then whoever is responsible has been active for generations. So who built the network? Was it the settlers who fled in fear? A cult that claimed the wells for ritual? Or something older, a force that predates both, using human hands to expand its reach? The unsettling truth is this: the network isn't just history. It's still being used. And the question no one can answer yet is, used by whom? Because until that is known, every hiker who steps onto Miller's Peak Trail may unknowingly be walking straight into a trap that has been waiting for them for centuries. In 2022, a journalist named Claire Raymond gained access to restricted county archives. She discovered that large portions of the land around Miller's Peak had been owned by a single family for generations: the Hawthorne family. The Hawthornes were wealthy ranchers in the 1800s, but their fortune collapsed in the 1920s. They quietly sold off parcels of land, all except one. That one untouched parcel sat directly above the network of chambers. To this day, it remains private property. Digging deeper, Claire found troubling details. In the 1940s, a Hawthorne patriarch, Charles Hawthorne, was accused of strange practices on the land. He was never charged, but neighbors reported nightly bonfires and chanting. In the 1960s, 2 Hawthorne sons were linked to disappearances of hikers, but again, no charges were filed. Police reports from the time mysteriously vanished. In the 1980s, the family donated a large sum of money to the county to expand hiking trails, including the one that passed Rachel and Michael's last known location. Why would a family with a history of secrecy and rumors push to bring more people onto land they had controlled for a century? A retired ranger, speaking anonymously, claimed that whenever searches came close to the Hawthorne property, orders came down to pull back. It didn't matter if dogs picked up a scent. If it crossed into Hawthorne land, we were told to stand down. Always. When asked why, he gave a chilling answer: because they're untouchable. Too much money, too many connections. And maybe too much fear. Today, only one Hawthorne is known to still live in the region: a reclusive man in his 70s named Elias Hawthorne. Locals describe him as eccentric, almost ghost-like. He rarely leaves his property, and when he does, it's always after dark. Some say they've seen him near the trailhead watching hikers with binoculars. Others claim he warns people away, muttering that the mountain has rules. When a reporter tried to interview him in 2021, he refused to speak. But before closing the door, he whispered, "They should have left the wells alone." Perhaps the most disturbing lead came from an estate sale in 2019, after a distant Hawthorne cousin passed away. Among the belongings was a leather-bound journal. Most of the entries were rambling, incoherent, but one passage stood out. "We keep the tradition. The watchers before us, the watchers after us. The wells are fed or the land takes more. This is the way." If true, then the Hawthornes may not just own the land. They may have been guardians, participants, or orchestrators of what happened beneath it. Which raises the most terrifying question yet. Were Rachel and Michael not just victims of chance, but chosen by a family whose secrets go back generations? As pressure mounts, journalists and families of the missing are demanding that Elias Hawthorne, the last living heir, be questioned. But if he truly knows what happened beneath those mountains, then he may hold the answers not only to Rachel and Michael's disappearance, but to dozens of others. And the real danger is this: if the Hawthorne family has been feeding the network for over a century, what happens if someone else is preparing to continue the tradition after Elias is gone? Because secrets this dark don't die with one man. In 2023, investigative journalist Claire Raymond traveled to Elias Hawthorne's estate, a sprawling but decaying ranch house at the edge of Miller's Peak. The property looked frozen in time. Overgrown fences, broken barns, windows boarded from the inside. Locals said Elias hadn't had visitors in years. Claire knocked on the door. First, nothing. Then, after several minutes, the door creaked open. Elias stood in the shadows, thin, pale, his eyes sunken. He didn't invite her in, but he didn't shut her out either. Instead, he asked one question: "Do you hear them too?" Claire managed to record nearly an hour of conversation with Elias on his porch. Much of it was incoherent, rambling about tradition, feeding the land, and keeping balance. But scattered through the madness were moments of chilling clarity. He admitted the wells weren't built by the Hawthornes. "They were here long before us. We just tended them." He insisted the disappearances weren't murder. "They go where they're called. We only show them the way." And when asked directly about Rachel and Michael, he paused for a long time before whispering, "They were chosen together, a pair to keep the balance." Claire pressed him for details. Chosen by who? By what? Elias shook his head violently, muttering, "If I say it, it comes for me too." Before leaving, Claire noticed something nailed to the inside of Elias's door. A photograph, faded, water-damaged. It showed Rachel Monroe and Michael Turner. Not the smiling engagement photo everyone had seen in newspapers. This was different. They were standing in the woods, looking frightened, glancing over their shoulders. It was one of the missing photographs believed to have been lost with their camera. When Claire asked where he got it, Elias only said, "They always send one back." Word of the interview spread quickly. Within days, authorities announced they were reopening the investigation into the Hawthorne family. But before they could act, something happened. Elias Hawthorne disappeared. When deputies entered his home, they found it abandoned. Dusty plates still on the table, a lamp left burning, and in the center of the floor, a single object, a rusted key, tied with twine to a note that read, "The last chamber." If Elias Hawthorne is gone, did he flee? Was he taken? Or did he walk willingly into the network his family had guarded for generations? And more importantly, what does the key unlock? Because if there really is a last chamber, then it may hold the final answers to what happened to Rachel and Michael, and the horrifying truth of what the Hawthornes have been protecting all along. Detectives and historians spent weeks combing through the Hawthorne estate, searching for anything the key might unlock. Old trunks, cellars, padlocked barns, nothing fit. Finally, a retired surveyor stepped forward. He had mapped Miller's Peak in the 1970s and remembered something unusual. A sealed iron door hidden in the cliffside, buried under brush and stone. The door hadn't appeared on any public maps, but it was exactly where the Hawthorne property ended, and the wilderness began. When the team reached the location, they found it exactly as described. A rusted iron door, half buried in rock, chained shut with corroded links. The key fit. The chain snapped open. Behind the door was a narrow stone passage, leading deep underground. The air smelled damp, metallic. Every step echoed like a warning. At the end of the passage, the group entered a circular room carved into the mountain itself. It was larger than the previous chambers, colder, silent, but this one was different. No piles of bones, no discarded clothing. Instead, the walls were covered in symbols. Strange markings burned into the stone, older than the Hawthorne family, older than the town itself. And in the center of the room, a single wooden chair. On it sat a bundle wrapped in canvas. Investigators unwrapped it carefully. Inside were a stack of photographs, water-stained but intact, a leather-bound book, and a silver locket. The locket contained 2 portraits, Rachel Monroe and Michael Turner. But the photographs were worse. They showed Rachel and Michael tied to the chair in that very chamber, their faces pale, terrified. Behind them, a blurred figure loomed, almost unrecognizable in the shadows. The final photograph showed the chair empty. The leather book appeared to be Elias Hawthorne's personal journal. The last entry was dated 2005, the same year the camera had been discovered. It read, "The balance was broken. They were meant to stay, but the land rejected them. Now it waits for another pair. I am too old. I will not hear the call again. When they find this, they will understand. The last chamber was never mine. I was only its keeper." If Rachel and Michael were photographed inside the last chamber, then they hadn't died on the hiking trail. They had been taken here, held, and possibly offered to whatever force Elias had written about. But if the land rejected them, as the journal claimed, then where did they go? At the far end of the chamber, behind the chair, the team discovered a narrow fissure in the rock, wide enough for a person to slip through. The opening descended deeper, into darkness. When searchers dropped a flare, it burned for only a moment before vanishing into what seemed like an endless abyss. And carved into the rock above it were 4 words. The offering was denied. When authorities discovered the fissure, most refused to enter. The air that drifted from it was freezing, heavy, almost suffocating. But 2 volunteers from a local search and rescue team agreed to lower themselves down with ropes and cameras. Their descent was streamed live to a monitor at the surface. At first, it was nothing but jagged stone. But then, strange markings began to appear on the walls, spirals, symbols, and shapes that didn't match any known language. One rescuer muttered through his radio, "These aren't carvings. They're burned in." After nearly 40 minutes, the rescuers touched down on a ledge. The space below wasn't just a crack in the rock. It was another chamber, larger than the last. But this one was filled with water. A dark, stagnant pool that stretched out into blackness. Floating near the shore was something white. Fabric. When they pulled it onto the rocks, it was a torn piece of a dress. Lace. Investigators compared it later to photos of Rachel's clothing. The match was undeniable. The rescuers continued along the edge of the water with flashlights. That's when they found the carvings. On the far wall, in deep scratches, were words written in English. "We are still here." The handwriting was shaky, desperate. Underneath it were initials. RM plus MT. Rachel Monroe. Michael Turner. Suddenly, one rescuer's flashlight flickered. Then, a sound like splashing came from deeper in the pool. The camera caught ripples spreading across the surface, though no rocks had been thrown. No movement was visible. The second rescuer's voice cracked over the radio. "Something's down here with us." Before anyone at the surface could respond, the feed cut to static. Panic erupted above ground. The team tried pulling the ropes up, but they went slack. When rescuers were finally lowered again hours later, they found the first team's ropes cut clean through, as if sliced by a blade. But there was no sign of the men. Only the torn piece of dress, and the message scratched into the wall, remained. Days later, A package arrived at the sheriff's office. No return address. Inside was the leather-bound Hawthorne journal that had been taken into evidence. But this time, it contained a new entry. The ink was fresh. The land has chosen again. They will not leave until another takes their place. Do not follow. Do not open the water. It is already waiting. If the handwriting belonged to Elias Hawthorne, how did he retrieve the journal after vanishing? And more terrifyingly, if Rachel and Michael wrote, "We are still here in the chamber," does that mean they're alive in some form? The water in that abyss may not be hiding their remains. It may be keeping something else. Something that's still waiting for the next offering. Despite the warning, authorities couldn't ignore what had been found. If Rachel and Michael had left that message, then answers still waited below. A specialized dive team was brought in, trained for underwater cave systems. Their mission was simple: explore the pool, recover evidence, and confirm if Rachel and Michael's remains were inside. But privately, several of them admitted they were uneasy. One diver said, "It's not the water that scares me. It's the idea of something wanting us down there." On the morning of the dive, 3 divers suited up with cameras, oxygen tanks, and backup lines. The surface team watched nervously as they submerged into the black water. Almost immediately, visibility dropped. The water was heavy with silt, each movement clouding the beam of their flashlights. 10 feet down, the stone walls narrowed into a tunnel. The divers pushed forward. After several minutes, the tunnel opened into a submerged chamber. On the floor of the cavern lay a small object, glinting under flashlight beams. When one diver picked it up, his hand trembled. It was a gold band, a ring. Later analysis would confirm it was Michael Turner's wedding band, engraved with his initials and Rachel's. But the divers didn't celebrate, because something else was in the chamber with them. As one diver scanned the walls, his camera caught movement. A pale shape drifting just beyond the range of the light. At first, they thought it was fabric, maybe more clothing. But then it moved, slowly, like a figure turning in the water. The diver froze, whispering into his radio, "There's someone down here." The shape drifted closer, and in the hazy light, it almost looked like a face. A pale, wide-eyed face staring back at them. Suddenly, the camera feed crackled. The diver's breathing grew frantic. One shouted through the radio, "It's following us, move, move now." The footage shook violently, beams of light scattering across the cavern. Then the feed went dark. The surface team tried frantically to reel the divers back in, but the lines went limp, and then severed. Hours later, search teams attempted recovery, but no trace of the 3 divers was ever found. Their equipment never resurfaced. Their oxygen tanks never floated back. Only one object was recovered, wedged between rocks near the fissure where they entered, a waterproof camera case. Inside was a single undeveloped roll of film. When the film was processed, only one image had survived the water damage. It showed the cavern wall, and on it, written in fresh scratches, were 5 words: "Don't bring them down here." The handwriting didn't match the previous message. It looked shaky, uneven, almost frantic, as if it had been written by someone very recently. If Rachel and Michael vanished in 1994, and the first rescuers disappeared only days earlier, then who left that message? And what did they mean by, "Don't bring them down here"? Because if the warnings are true, then the water isn't just hiding what happened to Rachel and Michael. It's hiding something still alive and waiting. At first, authorities believed the roll of film recovered from the abyss contained only the one message. But forensic experts at the state lab noticed faint outlines on the negatives. Through digital enhancement, several more images were revealed. They weren't complete, and much of the detail was lost. But what survived was disturbing. One photo showed 2 blurred figures, pale and human-shaped, standing waist-deep in the black water. Another showed what looked like claw marks carved into stone, as if someone had tried to escape. The final image was the most unsettling. It showed the cavern wall covered in dozens of handprints, some small, some large, pressed into the wet stone as if reaching out from inside. No one could explain how those handprints were made. Shortly after the photographs were released, The sheriff's office received an anonymous call. The voice on the other end was shaky, hoarse, almost inhuman. But what it said chilled investigators. "Don't open it again. They don't want you to." When asked who was speaking, the voice whispered, "Rachel," and the line went dead. The following week, Elias Hawthorne resurfaced. Not in person, but in another package, left outside the county courthouse at dawn. Inside was a second journal, also bound in leather. Its first page contained only a single sentence, written in Elias's unmistakable handwriting. "They are not gone. They are changed." The following pages contained rambling notes, sketches of the chamber, and repeated warnings. "Never let the water rise. If the offering is denied, the abyss holds them until it chooses again. You cannot bring them back whole." For weeks after the dive, the fissure chamber seemed dormant. But then strange activity began. Local hikers reported hearing screams echoing from the cliffs at night. Not animal screams, but voices calling for help. Sheriff's deputies who guarded the site swore they heard footsteps splashing in the water below, though no one had entered. And on 2 separate occasions, ropes and safety lines left inside the chamber were pulled violently into the fissure, as if something was tugging from below. Faced with mounting pressure, authorities considered sealing the fissure permanently. But others argued that doing so could trap evidence forever, including answers about what happened to Rachel and Michael. Before a decision could be made, something happened that changed everything. Late one night, an officer standing guard near the chamber heard a splash. When he investigated, he found a small waterproof case washed onto the rocks at the edge of the fissure. Inside was a photograph, undamaged, clear, and impossible to dismiss. It showed Rachel Monroe. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, but she was unmistakable. She was staring directly at the camera, as though someone had taken the photo only moments before. And behind her, something long and dark coiled in the water, almost serpent-like. Scrawled at the bottom in smeared ink were 3 words: "Don't follow us." If that photograph was real, if Rachel Monroe had been alive long after 1994, then what happened to her and Michael in the abyss is far worse than anyone imagined. Because the warnings weren't just to stay away. They were begging to be left there. The question is, why? By late 2023, local officials could no longer ignore the mounting deaths and disappearances. The sheriff, along with state authorities, made a controversial decision. The fissure would be sealed. Heavy concrete barriers were ordered. Engineers were contracted to pour tons of stone and reinforced steel into the chamber, burying the abyss permanently. But not everyone agreed. Some families of missing persons begged for more time, believing their loved ones were still alive below. Others warned that sealing it could make things worse. Even Elias Hawthorne, in his final journal entry, had written, "Never let the water rise." What if sealing it caused exactly that? The plan was to begin sealing at sunrise. But at 3 a.m., guards at the site reported something terrifying. From deep within the fissure, water began to surge upward, bubbling violently as though boiling from below. The guards swore they heard voices in the roar of it. Screams, pleas, even their own names. One deputy described it later. It was like 100 people calling out at once. Men, women, children, all begging to be pulled up. But the water, it wasn't right. It moved like it was alive. The surge receded after several minutes. But what it left behind was worse. On the stone floor of the chamber, just beyond the fissure, lay a single object. A leather shoe, old, mud-caked. Inside it was a folded piece of damp paper. On it, written in shaky handwriting, were 4 words: "The offering is broken." The shoe was later confirmed to belong to Michael Turner. At sunrise, engineers began lowering barriers into the chamber. But just as the first slabs were placed, a deafening rumble shook the mountain. The fissure water erupted again, this time higher, flooding part of the chamber floor. And as the concrete touched the water, every camera feed cut to static. The crew on site reported their equipment malfunctioning, flashlights dying, and even radios failing. In the chaos, one worker screamed that he saw hands, dozens of pale hands, reaching up through the water, clawing at the concrete as though trying to push it back. The crew was evacuated. Within an hour, a massive crack split across the chamber floor. One geologist later explained, "It wasn't just water down there. There's a pressure system like something pushing up. Whatever's below, it doesn't want to be sealed." By nightfall, the fissure had widened. The barriers collapsed inward, swallowed whole. The abyss remained open. With the seal attempt failed, the site was declared unstable. Officials announced they would reassess. But locals believed the truth. The abyss won. And in the weeks since, strange phenomena have increased. Hikers reported seeing a woman in a torn white dress wandering the cliffs. Divers' families received phone calls from disconnected numbers, with faint breathing on the line. And one deputy guarding the site vanished entirely, leaving behind only his flashlight, found on the chamber floor, still burning. The abyss was never sealed. It is still there, waiting, growing louder. And now, for the first time in years, the water is rising. If Rachel and Michael are truly still here, then they are not alone. By early winter of 2023, the fissure water had begun climbing higher into the chamber. At first, it was inches a week, then inches a day. The water seeped into cracks, threatening to destabilize the entire mountain slope. But it wasn't just the water itself. Animals in the area began behaving strangely. Herds of deer refused to go near the cliffs. Birds flew in wide circles overhead but never landed. And at night, locals swore they heard voices drifting downriver. Voices that sounded like Rachel and Michael calling for help. Geologists, law enforcement, and federal agencies gathered to decide the next step. Some argued to evacuate the area and let the mountain swallow itself. Others insisted on a final deep investigation before the fissure grew uncontrollable. One chilling proposal came from a retired Hawthorne historian. If the offering is broken, then the abyss will keep rising until another is made. The room went silent. No one wanted to admit what that implied. Despite the dangers, a small team volunteered to descend once more before the water rose beyond access. Among them was Claire Raymond, the journalist who had interviewed Elias Hawthorne before his disappearance. She believed the answers lay not in sealing the abyss, but in uncovering the truth of what happened to Rachel and Michael. "If they're still here," Claire told the cameras, "then maybe we can finally bring them home." The team prepared for what they called the last descent. Using reinforced ropes and waterproof lighting, they entered the fissure as the water lapped high against the stone. At the bottom, where the chamber had once been dry, it was now waist-deep in black water. Symbols on the walls glistened under their flashlights, as though freshly burned. Then Claire spotted something floating near the edge. A small bouquet of wildflowers, long decayed, tied with faded ribbon. Rachel's bridal bouquet. As the team pushed deeper, the waterline shifted. The once hidden crack at the back of the chamber, the narrow fissure where the divers had vanished, was now almost fully submerged. But something new was visible above it. Stone slabs forming an arch, etched with the same spirals and marks seen throughout the chambers. It wasn't just a fissure. It was a doorway. Before entering, Claire shined her light across the archway. There, scratched violently into the stone in jagged letters, was another message. Not from Rachel, not from Michael, but from one of the divers who had vanished only weeks earlier. "Don't let it out." The team froze, their lights trembling over the message. Because now the question was no longer about bringing Rachel and Michael back. It was about whether opening that doorway would unleash something meant to stay buried. And with the water still rising, they had only one choice: go forward into the darkness, or seal the abyss and risk never knowing the truth. The message divided the team. Some argued they should retreat and seal the chamber. The risk was too great. But Claire shook her head. "Rachel and Michael walked through this. Whatever is in there, it's the only place left we haven't searched. If we don't go in now, it'll all be lost under the water." With the flood pushing higher, time wasn't on their side. So, they clipped their lines tighter, sealed their waterproof cameras, and entered the doorway. The crack was narrow, forcing them to swim single file. The water pressed cold against their bodies, the stone walls scraping their shoulders. But when they emerged on the other side, the chamber opened wide. Their lights revealed a vast cavern, larger than a cathedral, but eerily silent. The ceiling stretched high above, dripping with stalactites. The ground sloped unevenly, scattered with broken rocks, bones, and rusted lanterns that looked centuries old. And at the center of the cavern stood something impossible. It was a raised platform of black stone, smooth and polished, as if crafted by hands. Upon it lay remnants of cloth, torn ribbons, and, most chillingly, a cracked camera identical to the one recovered years earlier. Claire's breath caught. It wasn't Michael's. It wasn't Rachel's. It was newer. Someone else had been here after them. As they approached the altar, their radios crackled with static. At first, it sounded like interference. But then, layered beneath the static, came voices. A man's voice. A woman's voice. Whispering the same phrase over and over, almost like a chant. "We are still here. We are still here." One of the divers ripped off his headset in panic, insisting the voices weren't coming through the earpiece. They were echoing across the cavern itself. While documenting the altar, Claire's light drifted lower and froze. Across the muddy floor were footprints. Not ancient, not fossilized, fresh. The imprints showed a man's heavy boots and a woman's smaller shoes, side by side, leading deeper into the cavern. At the far edge of the chamber, the team followed the prints into a narrow side tunnel. There, nailed crudely into the stone, was a strip of fabric, lace, yellowed with age but unmistakable, a piece of a wedding dress. Claire's voice cracked as she whispered, "Rachel!" And then the tunnel carried a sound none of them were prepared for. It wasn't the rush of water. It wasn't rock shifting. It was music, faint, distorted but real, the distant echo of a wedding march. The team froze, their lights trembling across the dark stone. The footsteps continued ahead. The music grew louder. And from somewhere beyond the tunnel, a single voice rang out. Not a whisper, but a cry. "Help us!" Claire turned toward her cameraman, eyes wide with fear and hope at once. Because the voice wasn't ancient. It wasn't imagined. It was Rachel's. The tunnel narrowed as the team pressed forward. Every step seemed heavier, as though the air itself resisted them. The music faded in and out, sometimes growing clear, then dissolving into static like a broken radio. But Rachel's voice persisted, weaving through the dark. "Michael! Michael, please!" Claire's hands shook as she adjusted her light. She whispered to herself, almost in prayer, "Please let it be real. Please let her still be alive." The tunnel suddenly widened into another chamber. What they saw made the team fall silent. Stone benches lined the cavern in rows, like crude pews. At the far end, a raised platform stood beneath an arch of jagged rock, and scattered across the ground were remnants of flowers, lace, and broken candles. It was a wedding frozen in time, recreated underground. But not a celebration, a ritual. Claire opened the file of Rachel and Michael's recovered photographs on her waterproof tablet, comparing them to the scene before them. In the final images, Rachel had stood near an archway that looked eerily similar to the one in this cavern. And in the corner of one photo, nearly missed in the shadows, was the faint outline of benches. It wasn't just a coincidence. The photos had been taken here. This was where their final moments were captured. Suddenly, one of the cameramen gasped and pointed his light at the platform. There, standing motionless in the beam, was a figure. A bride. The dress was torn, the veil tattered, but unmistakably white. The figure's head tilted slowly toward them. "Help us!" Her voice was Rachel's, but her face was blurred, shifting in and out of focus as though the air itself refused to hold her image. One of the divers bolted, screaming that it wasn't real, that they were being tricked. He ran back into the tunnel. His light vanished. His scream cut short. Only silence followed. Claire, trembling, took a step closer to the altar. "Rachel? Is that you?" The figure extended a pale hand. Something glimmered between her fingers. A gold engagement ring. Michael's. Rachel's form flickered, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They won't let us go." Before Claire could respond, the ground beneath the platform shuddered. Water burst through cracks, rushing into the chamber. The benches groaned, collapsing into the flood. The team scrambled, clutching ropes and gear. But Claire kept her eyes locked on Rachel, who was slowly sinking into the water, the ring still clutched in her hand. Her final words carried across the roar of the flood. "It's not over." The lights flickered. The water rose. When the team resurfaced minutes later, soaked, gasping, desperate for air, Claire turned to count her crew. One was missing. The diver who had panicked? Or someone else pulled under? And worse, on Claire's own wrist, tied to her climbing rope, was something that hadn't been there before. Michael Turner's broken watch. The surviving crew staggered out of the fissure, soaked, trembling, and pale. Rescue teams rushed to meet them, pulling them onto stretchers, checking their vitals. Claire clutched the broken watch, refusing to let it go. "It was her," she whispered. "Rachel was there. She gave me this." The rescuers exchanged uneasy glances, because the fissure had been sealed behind them, and no one could explain how an object lost in 1994 had appeared tied to Claire's rope in 2023. At first, they believed the missing man had drowned. But then came the radio transmission. Hours after the flood, his voice crackled through the team's emergency channel. "Don't come back. Don't follow." And then static. When they triangulated the signal, it wasn't coming from the fissure. It was coming from miles away, from deep within the forest where Rachel and Michael had first vanished. In the days that followed, those who had entered the abyss began to change. One cameraman reported hearing whispers in his hotel room at night, the same chant from the cavern, "We are still here." Another found his footage corrupted. Every frame of Rachel's figure was blurred, distorted, but her voice came through clearer each time the video was played. And Claire herself woke one morning to find the watch ticking again, even though it had been waterlogged and broken for decades. But it wasn't keeping the right time. It was counting down. Meanwhile, hikers near the trail began reporting strange sightings. A woman in a wedding dress wandering between the trees. A man's voice calling out for help near the river. And, most disturbing of all, small bouquets of wildflowers appearing at trail markers, tied with faded ribbon. The same flowers Rachel had carried on her wedding day. The investigation team reviewed the last message carved into the stone by a missing diver. "Don't let it out." For the first time, they wondered if the abyss hadn't been a prison for Rachel and Michael, but for something else. And by answering Rachel's call for help, they might have broken the very seal that had kept it contained. On the 7th day after their return, Claire received a package at her hotel. No return address, no postage. Inside was a roll of undeveloped film. She rushed it to the lab. When the negatives were processed, her blood ran cold. They weren't old photos. They weren't from 1994. They were new. Photos of Claire and her team, standing at the altar in the cavern, the blurred figure of Rachel behind them. Photos that no one in her crew had taken. The last frame showed Claire herself asleep in her hotel room. And in the corner of the image, reflected in the mirror, Rachel Monroe was standing there, her veil dripping wet, holding out the engagement ring. Claire locked the photo in her drawer and tried to convince herself it was a hoax, that someone from her own crew staged it. But deep down, she knew, the reflection in the mirror wasn't staged. It was the same blurred figure from the abyss, the same voice she had heard underground. Rachel Monroe was no longer trapped below. She was here. The broken watch, the one tied to Claire's rope, ticked louder with each passing day. Not normal ticks. Each second dragged, like the hollow chime of a distant bell. And the countdown continued. 23 hours, 14 minutes, 59 seconds, counting down to something. That night, Claire dreamed of the cavern. She stood at the stone altar, lace and flowers scattered at her feet. The benches were filled with shadows, faceless guests who hummed the wedding march. And at the end of the aisle, Michael Turner waited, dressed in black, his face gaunt and hollow. Behind him stood Rachel in her torn gown, whispering, "Say the vows or we never leave." When Claire woke, the sheets were damp, as if water had seeped into her bed. 2 days later, a hiker was found stumbling out of the woods near the trailhead. It was the missing diver. Barefoot, pale, his eyes wide with terror. When questioned, he repeated only one phrase over and over: "She followed us out. She's not Rachel anymore." Then he collapsed, his skin ice-cold, lungs filling with water despite never being submerged. He died within the hour. That same evening, Claire returned to her hotel room to find something resting on her nightstand. A gold engagement ring, but not Michael's. This one was delicate, smaller, designed for a woman's hand. Rachel's ring. And carved inside the band was a single word, scratched crudely, as though by a desperate hand: "Run." Claire stared at the ring, trembling, torn between fear and pity. Because if Rachel's spirit was warning her to run, then what had followed them back wasn't Rachel at all. As she lifted the ring, the watch on her wrist struck 0. And from the bathroom mirror behind her, a dripping hand pressed against the glass. Claire froze, unable to move, as water dripped from the mirror onto the floor. At first it was only the hand. Pale, slender fingers pressing harder, leaving streaks across the glass. Then the rest of the figure emerged. Rachel. Her veil clung wetly to her face, her gown torn and blackened at the edges as though burned. Her mouth opened, and a voice that was both hers and not hers whispered, "You shouldn't have followed." The glass cracked. Claire stumbled back, hitting the dresser as water spilled onto the carpet. Rachel's figure pressed harder against the fractured mirror, her blurred face straining forward, until her hand broke through, spraying shards and water across the room. She stepped halfway out, her veil dripping, her other hand still clutching Michael's ring. For one terrifying second, her eyes cleared. They were human. Rachel's. "Help me," she gasped, voice raw and broken. "They won't let me go." Then her face twisted, the blur returning, her voice overlapping with another deeper tone. "She is ours now." Claire screamed, grabbing the ring from her nightstand. The moment she clutched it in her palm, Rachel froze. The deeper voice hissed, retreating. Rachel's face flickered again, softer, desperate. "Run, before it takes you too." Her body convulsed, half in the room, half trapped in the mirror. And then, with a sound like rushing water, she was gone. The mirror lay shattered on the floor, the carpet soaked. The hotel staff rushed in minutes later, but found nothing. No broken glass, no water damage, only Claire, shaking, clutching the ring with bleeding hands. And yet, when she checked the security footage from the hallway outside her room, the camera showed water leaking from beneath her door. That night, Claire sat awake, staring at the ring. On its inner band, the word that had once read "run" had changed. Now it read, "Stay." And from the shadows of her room, a faint wedding march began to play. Claire sat at the edge of her hotel bed, the ring clenched in her hand. Every instinct told her to throw it away, to burn it, to escape. But the moment she tried to loosen her grip, her body froze. Her fingers refused to let go. It wasn't a choice anymore. The ring had chosen her. In desperation, Claire sought out Dr. Alistair Greaves, a historian who had warned earlier investigators about the abyss. When she showed him the ring, his face drained of color. "This isn't a relic," he whispered. "It's a tether. Whoever wears it becomes part of the binding. You're not just holding Rachel's fate now. You're holding the gate itself." Claire's voice trembled. "Then what happens if I take it off?" He looked her in the eyes. "You won't." That night, as Claire lay awake, the music returned. No longer faint, no longer distant. It played clearly, as if an organ was inside her room. She looked at the ring and saw words shifting again on the inside of the band. "Say the vows." Her reflection in the window blinked, but did not blink back in time with her. Claire now understood the truth. Rachel and Michael hadn't just vanished into the abyss. They had been offered, bound into some ritual that turned a wedding into a prison. And now, through the ring, The abyss was preparing to finish what began in 1994. It wasn't calling her to report on the story. It was calling her to take Rachel's place. At 3 a.m., Claire's phone lit up with a new voicemail. She pressed play. It was Rachel's voice, trembling, exhausted, barely a whisper. "Don't marry it." Then static. And beneath the static, Michael's voice, low and broken, almost begging. "Claire, please say yes." Claire buried herself in records, police reports, newspaper clippings, forgotten interviews from '94. Most of it told the same tired story. A young couple vanished while hiking, their families left shattered. But buried in an old local newspaper archive, she found something different. A statement from Rachel's maid of honor, Anna Pierce. Anna claimed Rachel had been frightened the week before the trip. She kept saying something was watching her. She thought the wedding wasn't just a wedding. She said, "We weren't the ones planning it." Claire's hands trembled as she printed the page. Rachel had known. That night, Claire fell into a heavy, oppressive sleep. She wasn't in her hotel room anymore. She was standing in Rachel's bedroom the night before the hike. Rachel sat on the floor in her wedding dress, though the ceremony was still weeks away, crying into her veil. Michael paced the room, whispering frantically, "They want it, Ratch. They want the vows. Once we go, we can't come back." Claire tried to shout, "What do you mean? Who wants it?" But neither of them could hear her. Rachel lifted her head. For one horrifying moment, her tear-streaked face looked directly at Claire. "You're the next one." Claire jolted awake, drenched in sweat. The wedding march was still playing faintly, but this time it came from her phone. She checked the screen. No music app was open. No call. Only one thing: the wallpaper had changed. A black and white photo of Rachel in her wedding dress staring out at her. The next morning, Claire returned to Dr. Greaves. She told him everything: the voicemail, the dream, the photo. He closed his eyes as if in pain. "I knew it," he muttered. "The binding isn't just a ritual. It's generational. Every so often, the abyss selects another. The ring finds them." Claire's voice cracked. "And if I refuse?" He looked at her, haunted. "Then it will take someone you love instead. That's how it ensures compliance." Claire dug deeper into the camera film. Most of the images were already studied by police, the couple smiling, then frightened, then standing at the abyss. But Claire noticed something others hadn't. In one photo, Rachel wasn't wearing her engagement ring. Her hand was bare. In the very next shot, she wore it again, but the engraving inside the band had changed. It no longer read Michael plus Rachel, forever. It read, "Till death, then beyond." Claire dropped the photo. The same words were now carved faintly into her own finger beneath the ring. That night, as she tried to remove the band again, the metal seared into her skin, refusing to budge. Her phone buzzed. Another voicemail. This time it was Anna Pierce, Rachel's maid of honor from 1994. A voice? Frantic, breathless. Older now but still sharp. "Claire, I don't know how you found me, but listen. Rachel never wanted that ring. She begged me to destroy it. If you're wearing it, then it's too late. You've already said yes." The line went dead. Claire looked at her reflection, and Rachel's face smiled back at her. Claire tracked Anna down to a quiet town outside Portland. The woman who opened the door was older, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes tired but sharp. She looked at Claire's hand first thing, at the ring, and nearly slammed the door shut. Claire wedged her foot in. "Please, Anna, I just need answers. I need to know what Rachel told you." Anna hesitated, trembling. Then finally, she opened the door wider. "Come in. But you won't like what you hear." They sat at a worn kitchen table. A cross hung crooked on the wall, candles half melted in every corner, as if Anna had been trying to keep the shadows back. "She came to me the night before they left," Anna began. Rachel wasn't herself. Her dress was in tatters, her hands were bleeding. She said she'd been having dreams. The same dream every night. A wedding in the woods, an altar made of stone, voices chanting her name. Anna swallowed hard. She told me the ring wasn't Michael's idea, she said. She woke up one morning and it was already on her finger. Michael swore he didn't put it there. But when she tried to take it off, it cut her. Claire's heart pounded. The engraving changed, didn't it? Anna's eyes flicked up, terrified. Yes. First it said, forever. Then it said, something else. I won't repeat it. I told her to smash it, to burn it. But Rachel just cried. She said it wouldn't let her. Anna leaned closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. She begged me to come on the hike with them. She said the ring wanted a witness. I thought she was losing her mind. God help me. I told her no. Claire's stomach twisted. Anna's voice cracked. That's the last time I saw her. The next day they were gone. And when they found the camera years later, I didn't even have to see the pictures. I knew the ring had taken them. Claire lifted her hand from the table, showing Anna the band. The older woman flinched as though she'd seen a weapon. Why are you wearing it? She demanded, her voice trembling. I didn't choose it, Claire whispered. It found me. The candles in the room flickered violently. A thin line of blood welled beneath the ring, seeping into her skin. Anna gasped. It's starting, she whispered. The vows. It's preparing you. Before Claire could ask more, Anna stood abruptly, backing away. I can't help you anymore. I failed Rachel. I won't be dragged in again. If you want answers, go back to the trail. Back to where they vanished. That's where you'll see it. That's where you'll understand. Claire's voice broke. Anna, please. But Anna's face hardened. Don't ask me again. If you go, you'll never come back. She opened the front door and pointed outside. Leave. Claire stepped into the cold night, shaken. The air felt heavier now, almost buzzing. She checked her phone, and her blood ran cold. A new image had appeared in her gallery. It was Rachel in her torn wedding dress, standing on the exact hiking trail where she and Michael disappeared. Only this time, Rachel was holding Claire's hand. And Claire knew. She hadn't taken that picture. Claire didn't want to go back. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to throw the ring into the ocean and never look back. But she knew Anna was right. If Rachel's final hours were tied to the trail, then that's where the truth lived. And if she didn't face it, the ring would drag her there anyway. So, 2 days later, Claire packed her camera, a flashlight, and her recorder, and drove north. The deeper she went into the forest, the worse the air felt. Heavy, thick, like she was walking into a memory she didn't belong in. By the time she reached the trailhead, dusk was falling. The wooden sign, weathered by decades, still read, Turner's Bend Trail, 5 miles. Claire froze. Turner. Michael Turner. Had they chosen this trail because of his name, or had the trail chosen them? She switched on her recorder. Day 1. I've returned to Turner's Bend Trail. This is where Rachel and Michael vanished in 1994. I don't know what I'll find, but the ring, it's humming. It's pulling me forward. And it was true. The metal against her skin was vibrating faintly, almost impatient. Half a mile in, Claire spotted something strange. A tree, its bark carved with initials. She stepped closer, running her hand over the rough surface. +R. Her chest tightened. Michael and Rachel. But beneath it, scratched into the wood as though in panic, were other words. Don't follow. Her flashlight flickered. And when the beam steadied again, the carving was gone. The bark was smooth, untouched. An hour later, Claire reached the clearing where hikers had last reported seeing Rachel and Michael. The air here was wrong. Still, she turned off her recorder and just listened. First, only silence. Then, faint whispers. Do you take her? Do you take him? The words echoed from nowhere and everywhere, like a priest's voice carried on the wind. Claire clutched her chest. Her pulse hammered. The ring grew warm, glowing faintly in the dark. And then she saw them. 2 faint figures at the far end of the clearing, one in a wedding dress, the other in a dark suit. Rachel and Michael. Claire froze, her breath caught in her throat. The figures didn't move, didn't look at her. They just stood hand in hand, waiting, as if frozen in time. She raised her camera. Snap! The flash burst across the clearing, and the figures vanished. But when she looked down at the camera screen, her blood turned to ice. The photo showed Rachel and Michael clearly, but behind them stood a third figure, tall, faceless, draped in black, holding a book. His hand was extended toward Claire. The ring on her finger burned. She screamed, dropping the camera. When she looked down, the inside of the band had changed again. The words read, "Speak the vows. Tonight." Her phone buzzed violently. A voicemail. She pressed play. It was Michael's voice, soft but urgent. "Claire, we're waiting." And then the wedding march began again, louder than ever, coming from the forest itself. Claire forced herself forward, flashlight trembling in her hand. The deeper she moved into the trail, the more unnatural the forest became. The trees leaned inward, their branches clawing across the path like fingers. The silence wasn't silence anymore. It was heavy, layered with whispers she couldn't quite make out. She turned on her recorder. Turner's Bend, 10:42 p.m. The atmosphere has shifted. The ring is burning. The forest feels alive. She stopped, realizing the whispers weren't just nonsense. They were repeating the same phrase over and over, in unison. "Do you take her? Do you take him?" After nearly an hour of pushing deeper, the trail opened into a hidden glade. At its center stood a structure. Stone. Weathered. Circular. An altar. It wasn't man-made, not exactly. The stones jutted at odd angles, some carved, some fused, as though grown from the earth itself. And on the altar lay two items, a veil yellowed with age, and a camera identical to the one recovered years ago. Claire's chest tightened. Her trembling hand reached for the veil. When she lifted it, a drop of blood slid down her palm. The veil wasn't fabric anymore. It was skin. The ring pulsed like a heartbeat, syncing with her own. The engraving shifted again. This time it read, "Say I do." Claire gasped and staggered back. The camera on the altar snapped open on its own. The flash went off, blinding her. When her vision cleared, she was no longer alone. They surrounded the clearing. Dozens of shadowy figures in tattered wedding clothes, bridesmaids, groomsmen, guests. All faceless, all watching silently. Rows of them, a wedding congregation. And at the far end, beneath the trees, stood Rachel and Michael. Rachel in her torn wedding dress, Michael in his black suit. Hand in hand, smiling faintly, Rachel lifted her face toward Claire and whispered, audible even across the glade, "Finish what we couldn't." Then the faceless figure appeared, draped in black, towering over the altar, clutching its strange book. Its voice echoed through the trees, low and hollow. "We gather once more. The vows must be spoken. The offering must continue." Claire's knees buckled. Her body shook violently. The ring seared deeper into her skin, fusing. She tried to scream, but only a broken whisper escaped. "Why me?" The faceless officiant tilted its head. "Because she ran. And now you wear the ring." The congregation began to chant louder. "Do you take her? Do you take him?" Rachel and Michael stepped closer, their eyes hollow, their smiles forced. Claire's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with trembling hands. A new voicemail. She pressed play. It was her own voice, whispering, "I do." The faceless guests rose in unison, their heads tilting toward Claire. The whispers became thunder. "Do you take him? Do you take her?" The ground beneath her feet trembled. The ring burned so hot it felt welded to her finger. Claire staggered backward, clutching her hand. "I'm not part of this," she shouted. "This isn't my wedding." But the officiant raised its book. The congregation fell silent. "Every bride says that, at first." Rachel and Michael walked slowly toward Claire, their movements stiff, unnatural. Their eyes glowed faintly, not alive, not dead. Rachel reached out, her voice soft, almost pleading. "Don't fight it, Claire. It's easier if you don't fight." Michael's hand touched her shoulder. His smile was kind, but wrong stretched too wide. "She doesn't understand yet," he told Rachel. Then to Claire, "You're not replacing us. You're joining us." The officiant lifted the veil from the altar. The one Claire had seen was made of skin. It floated unnaturally, draping itself over Claire's head before she could move. She screamed and clawed at it, but the fabric fused against her hair, her face, sinking cold into her skin. The congregation cheered silently, shaking in place as if in joy. Rachel whispered through the veil, "It's binding you, just like it bound me." The officiant's voice thundered, "Do you take this bond? To remain forever, to cross the veil of death, to be joined in abyssal union?" The ring pulsed once, twice. Claire tried to speak, to say no, but her jaw locked tight. The words bubbled up from her throat. Not her choice, not her voice. "I do." The congregation erupted in a single guttural cheer. The ground beneath the altar split open. A fissure, black and bottomless, spreading wider with each word. Hands, pale, skeletal, reached up from the darkness, clawing the air as though desperate to escape. The officiant turned the book toward Claire. The pages were blank, yet blood began to scrawl across them, forming her name. Claire Raymond. Below it, two more names, Rachel Monroe, Michael Turner, all written in the same thick, dripping red. Claire's body shook violently as the officiant pressed the book into her hands. "You are bound now," it whispered. "Do you know what that means?" Through tears, Claire forced herself to whisper, "No." Rachel and Michael stepped closer, their smiles fading. Rachel's voice cracked. "It means we never left. The ring doesn't marry you to each other. It marries you to it." She pointed toward the fissure. The abyss below roared. The officiant raised a hand, its faceless head tilting. "Then let the bride take her place." Hands surged upward from the fissure, wrapping around Claire's ankles, her wrists, her waist, dragging her toward the altar's edge. She screamed, clawing at the veil, fighting the pull. Rachel and Michael only watched, tears in their hollow eyes. Claire's recorder, still clutched in her pocket, clicked on by itself, and through the static, her own voice whispered again, "Forever begins tonight." The fissure widened, swallowing the altar's stones. Claire's body plunged downward, dragged by dozens of pale, clawed hands. The world above grew smaller, the congregation vanishing into shadows, the faceless officiant raising its book in triumph. Rachel and Michael's hollow eyes were the last she saw before darkness swallowed her whole. The air grew cold. Her screams echoed into silence. And then, she landed. Claire staggered to her feet. She wasn't in a cave. Not in any earthly place. The ground was black glass, stretching endlessly, reflecting her face 1,000 times. Above her was no sky, only a swirling void of red and violet clouds, moving as though alive. And scattered across the ground were remnants, wedding veils, tuxedo jackets, wilted bouquets, rings, hundreds of them scattered like coins. She picked one up and gasped. Each band bore a name, Rachel Monroe, Michael Turner, and others she didn't know. Dozens, hundreds. She dropped the ring, shaking violently. This wasn't just Rachel's story. It was a cycle. "Claire!" The voice echoed across the glass plane. She turned. Rachel and Michael stood before her, clearer than ever, no longer hollow apparitions. But they weren't alive either. Their skin was pale, their eyes glowing faintly, their bodies held together by invisible strings. Rachel stepped forward, her wedding dress trailing behind her like smoke. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. Michael added, his tone almost kind, "But now you're one of us, and soon you'll understand." Claire's breath came in sharp gasps. "What is this place?" Rachel's lips trembled. "The altar is just the door. This is the hall beyond it, where the vows echo forever." Michael looked up toward the swirling clouds. "They don't let us leave. We stand. We wait. And when a new bride comes, we welcome her." Claire's stomach twisted. "You wanted me to finish what you couldn't." Rachel nodded slowly, tears rolling down her pale cheeks. Because only one bride can leave. Only one can break the chain. The ground trembled. Claire turned, and saw the faceless officiant rising from the glass floor itself, its robe flowing like liquid shadow. It raised its book once more. The bride has entered the eternal hall. The union must be sealed. The congregation appeared again, phantoms filling the horizon, clapping silently, their hands striking nothing. The officiant extended its arm toward Claire. Take your place beside them. Rachel reached for Claire's hand. Her touch was cold, fragile, trembling. Please, she whispered. If you don't, it'll take someone else. Someone you love. Michael stood on her other side, his hollow smile fading. Choose now, Claire. Be bound with us, or the abyss will find another in your place. The officiant's voice boomed, shaking the hall. Say the final vow. Claire's lips trembled. She could feel the words rising, clawing their way out of her throat. Against her will. I do. The officiant's faceless head tilted toward her. Its voice boomed like thunder across the abyss. Speak. Seal the union. Become one of us. The congregation of shadows leaned forward, their mouths opening wide, though no sound emerged. Only a low, collective hiss, like steam rising from the earth. Claire's chest burned. Her lips trembled. The words, I do, clawed their way up her throat, as if something inside her had already claimed her voice. She bit her tongue until she tasted blood, trying to hold them back. No, she whispered. This isn't my vow. Rachel clutched her arm, her pale fingers digging into Claire's skin. You don't understand. If you resist, it won't just take you. It will hunt. It will spread. Someone you love, your mother, your brother, your child. Someone will pay in your place. Her eyes shimmered with tears. I tried to resist once. That's why Michael is here. It took him instead. Michael's hollow gaze met Claire's. He nodded slowly. She's telling the truth. One bride. One sacrifice. That's the only way. The officiant extended a long, skeletal hand toward Claire. Its fingers were blackened, charred like burnt wood, yet sharp and elegant like the edges of broken glass. Bride of the abyss, it intoned. Take your place. Speak your vow. End the cycle for another 11 years. Claire's heart pounded. The abyss wasn't just about Rachel and Michael. This had been happening for decades, maybe centuries. Dozens of rings, dozens of names. How many lives had been swallowed just to feed this ritual? Claire staggered back, shaking her head violently. No, I won't do it. I won't keep this going. Rachel screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. Then you'll doom someone else. The officiant's faceless head turned slowly toward Rachel. Its voice dripped with venom. She speaks truth. The vow must be spoken. If not hers, then yours will remain unfinished. And the abyss will hunger again. Michael's pale hands trembled as he stepped closer. It's not about stopping it, he whispered. It's about choosing who pays the price. The ground beneath them cracked. The black glass shattered outward, revealing a molten red glow below. From the fissures, shadowy hands erupted, dozens, hundreds, reaching upward, grasping for Claire, for Rachel, for Michael. The officiant raised both arms, the congregation hissing louder, their forms writhing like smoke in the air. Speak the vow. Claire clenched her fists, her voice trembling but louder now. I won't marry your abyss. I won't be your bride. And I won't let it take anyone else. Not my family, not anyone. The officiant tilted its faceless head, as if amused. Then you choose destruction. The ground split wider. The molten glow surged upward, and the congregation screamed in silence, their mouths stretching wider than any humans should. Rachel fell to her knees, clutching her head, her voice breaking. Please, Claire, don't do this. Don't make me lose everything again. Michael's pale figure began to flicker, his outline warping. If she refuses, he whispered, the abyss will unravel. We will unravel. The officiant's skeletal hand lunged forward, wrapping around Claire's wrist. It burned cold, like ice and fire at once. "Say it," Claire screamed, fighting against the pull, her free hand gripping the cracked glass floor. Rachel's sobs echoed. Michael's voice begged, and as the officiant dragged her toward the molten abyss, Claire felt the words rising in her throat again, tearing at her voice. "I." Her body shook violently. Would she speak the vow? Or could she find one last way to break the cycle? The abyss roared in fury, waiting for her answer. The officiant's skeletal grip tightened around Claire's wrist, dragging her toward the molten glow beneath the shattered glass floor. The congregation screamed without sound, their shadowed forms writhing as cracks spread across their bodies. Rachel sobbed, crawling across the broken glass. "Please, don't do this. You don't know what you're condemning." Michael flickered, his form distorting, like a candle flame struggling against the wind. The officiant bellowed, voice booming across eternity. "Say it, now." Claire's lips trembled. The words clawed at her throat, aching to escape. "I do." For a moment she thought about surrendering. One vow, one life, and it would all be over for now. But whose life? Hers? Rachel's? Michael's? Someone she loved back in the real world? The abyss didn't deal in fairness, only hunger. Her body convulsed. The words tore free. "I." She bit down hard, choking on blood, forcing them back. "No," she whispered, barely audible. "Not like this." Rachel's face twisted between rage and despair. "You don't understand," she screamed, her voice echoing unnaturally across the hall. Tears streamed down her pale face. "I was supposed to be the bride. If you don't finish this, it will never end. It will never stop." Michael's form collapsed further, his voice breaking. "Rachel, it's already too late." The ground split wide, molten light flooding upward. The officiant's faceless form began to dissolve, its robe shredding into streams of shadow, its skeletal hands thrashing as if drowning. The congregation burst into clouds of smoke, shrieking without sound as they were swallowed into the cracks. Rachel clutched Claire's shoulders, shaking her violently. "You'll doom us all." Claire shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No. Maybe this is the only way to end it." Rachel's scream pierced the void. And then, silence. Everything stopped. The officiant was gone. The congregation gone. Even Rachel and Michael faded into mist, their forms unraveling until only their rings remained on the glass floor. The molten glow receded, leaving the abyss eerily still. Claire stood alone in the endless black hall, shaking, sobbing, her voice barely a whisper. "It's over." Her eyes fluttered. When she opened them, she was lying on the forest floor. The altar was gone, the fissure sealed. It was morning. Birds sang in the distance. For a moment, she believed she had escaped, that she had broken the chain. She reached for her hand. The ring was gone. Her relief lasted only seconds, because carved into the bark of the tree beside her was a single phrase: "The bride must take her place." And on the ground beneath it, half buried in dirt, was her own engagement ring, though Claire had never been engaged. Claire staggered back, her chest tightening with dread. The forest around her grew darker, though the sun still shone. She heard something move behind her. Faint voice. Rachel's voice. "It doesn't end. Not until the vow is spoken." Claire turned, but the forest was empty. Only the wind, only silence. And then, the sound of footsteps on the trail. Another hiker approaching, unaware.